Dr. Sarah Mitchell was finishing her night shift at Oak Ridge Memorial Hospital when the blizzard hit, coating Minnesota in a blanket of unforgiving white. As she signed her last chart, a wounded German shepherd with matted fur and desperate eyes burst through the emergency doors, something small and bundled clutched gently in its bloodied mouth. The security guards lunged forward but froze when the bundle moved. 6 hours later, with the hospital in lockdown and police swarming the corridors, Dr. Mitchell stared at the tiny infant fighting for life in the NICU incubator, her medical training barely keeping her hands steady. What she found on the baby's chest, a distinctive heart-shaped birthmark, exactly like her deceased daughter's, made the blood freeze in her veins. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Oak Ridge, Minnesota had once been a thriving lumber town, now mostly surviving on winter tourism and the regional medical center where Sarah had worked for the past decade. The town sat nestled between ancient pine forests and frozen lakes, its Victorian-era main street now buried under 3 feet of December snow. Dr. Sarah Mitchell had built a reputation as the pediatric specialist you wanted when things got dire. At 38, the lines around her eyes had deepened this past year, not just from the long shifts, but from the divorce papers that had come 6 months after burying her 8-year-old daughter, Emma. The congenital heart defect had taken her suddenly, despite Sarah's medical knowledge and desperate efforts. Colleagues whispered that she worked too hard now, as if saving others might fill the void Emma left behind. The hospital staff knew to give Sarah space, especially Nurse Jessica Thompson, who had held Sarah's hand at Emma's funeral and now managed to appear with coffee just when Sarah's eyes grew too heavy. "You need more than medicine in your life," Jessica would say, but never pushed when Sarah changed the subject. Sheriff Robert Anderson had known Sarah since high school. He'd been the football star, she the science whiz. Now he stopped by the pediatric ward more than necessary, ostensibly for community relations. The nurses had a betting pool on when he'd finally ask her to dinner. Hospital Administrator Thomas Wilson cared more for protocols than patients. His pressed suits and perpetual frown had earned him the nickname The Undertaker among staff. He'd been pressuring Sarah to take a sabbatical, concerned her grief affected her judgment. Unknown to any of them, the German shepherd that would change everything had been wandering the outskirts of Oak Ridge for months. Shadow, as his military tags identified him, had once been a decorated service dog, trained to detect explosives and protect his handler. The scars across his muzzle and the pronounced limp in his right hind leg spoke of violence survived. Local children reported sightings, but no one could get close. Like the town itself, both Sarah and Shadow were survivors, wounded but standing, unaware that the approaching storm would bind their fates irrevocably together. The night shift at Oak Ridge Memorial had started like any other for Sarah. She'd reviewed charts, checked on her youngest patients, and tried not to think about the empty house waiting for her. By 11:30 p.m., as the wind howled against the windows and the first heavy snowflakes began to fall, the emergency department had grown quiet, an eerie calm, before the inevitable storm-related accidents would begin rolling in. "We're down 3 nurses tonight," Jessica informed her, brushing snow from her scrubs after coming in from a quick cigarette break. Anderson called, said to expect road closures by midnight. "The interstate's already impassable." Sarah nodded, finishing her lukewarm coffee. "I'll stay on if needed." She always did. Home held nothing but echoes now. At 11:42 p.m., Sarah lost her youngest patient of the night, a 4-year-old boy named Tyler, whose asthma attack had escalated beyond their control. She called the time of death with a steady voice that betrayed none of the screaming inside her mind. Another child she couldn't save. Another set of parents whose lives would never be the same. Outside the hospital, miles away in the industrial district, Shadow limped through deepening snow. The cold bit through his matted fur, the old wound in his leg throbbing with each labored step. 6 months since the night of gunfire and blood. 6 months of surviving on discarded scraps and avoiding human contact. But tonight was different. Tonight, the whimpering sounds from behind the abandoned factory had cut through his hardened wariness. The tiny form wrapped in a thin blanket was barely moving when Shadow found it. His military training kicked in: assess, protect, transport to safety. His keen nose detected the scent of milk and talcum powder beneath the more worrying smell of cold and distress. With careful precision, Shadow maneuvered the bundle into his mouth, supporting the weight just as he'd been trained to carry fragile explosives. By midnight, the blizzard had engulfed Oak Ridge. The hospital's emergency generator hummed to life as the power flickered. Sarah stood at the nurse's station, reviewing Tyler's chart one more time, searching for anything she might have missed, any intervention that could have changed the outcome. Shadow's journey was slow and painful. Each step sank deep into the snow, the precious cargo in his mouth growing quieter, a dangerous sign. His training had included understanding human vital signs, and the bundle's weakening movements triggered his urgency protocol. The hospital's illuminated sign cut through the swirling snow like a beacon. The emergency entrance was quiet when Shadow arrived at 12:28 a.m. He hesitated at the automatic doors, ancient instincts warring with his immediate mission. The bundle in his mouth made a soft sound barely audible, and decision crystallized. Shadow limped forward, triggering the motion sensors. The fluorescent lighting inside was blinding after the darkness of the storm. Shadow blinked, disoriented, as the security guard at the desk jumped to his feet. "Hey, get that mutt out of here." The guard reached for his radio. "We've got a stray dog in the ED entrance." Shadow backed away, growling low in his throat. Not aggression, but warning. "Don't approach. Mission critical." The bundle squirmed weakly. "What the hell?" A second guard appeared, grabbing a broom from the janitor's closet. "Shoo, get out." The commotion drew Sarah from the nurse's station. She rounded the corner, exhaustion forgotten as she assessed the standoff. "Wait," she called, seeing the guards advance on the trembling dog. "Don't scare him off. He's got something." Shadow's eyes, one brown, one clouded with an old injury, locked onto Sarah's. Recognition of purpose passed between them, an understanding as old as the bond between humans and canines. Here, his instincts told him, was someone who would help. "Easy now," Sarah said, crouching down 10 feet away. "It's okay, boy." The security guards exchanged skeptical glances. "Dr. Mitchell, hospital policy clearly states—" "I can see that," Sarah interrupted, never breaking eye contact with Shadow. "He's not aggressive. He's trying to show us something." Shadow took one tentative step forward, then another. The bundle in his mouth moved again, and this time Sarah heard it, a faint mewling cry that stopped her heart. "That's a baby," she whispered, then louder. "That dog has a baby, Jessica. Get a warming blanket in the pediatric crash cart, now." Shadow carefully laid his precious cargo on the floor before Sarah, backing away just enough to allow her access while maintaining protective proximity. With trembling fingers, Sarah unwrapped the thin blanket. The infant was tiny newborn, blue-tinged, barely breathing. A girl, no more than a few days old, with dark, wispy hair and skin like ice. "Oh, God," Sarah breathed, medical training taking over as she scooped up the child. Code Blue, Pediatric Now. As Sarah rushed the baby toward the trauma room, Shadow followed, limping but determined, ignoring the shouts of the security guards. His mission wasn't complete. Not yet. The morning after the storm dawned blindingly bright, sunlight reflecting off snowdrifts that had swallowed cars and first-floor windows throughout Oak Ridge. The hospital corridors buzzed with whispered conversations and sidelong glances as staff changed shifts, everyone eager to glimpse the miracle baby and her canine savior. Sarah had refused to leave the NICU, catching fitful moments of sleep in a chair pulled close to the infant's incubator. Shadow remained at her feet, accepting water from a plastic emesis basin but refusing the kibble a sympathetic orderly had brought from the cafeteria. His vigilance matched Sarah's own, both guardians keeping watch through the critical first hours. "Her vitals have stabilized," Sarah noted, reviewing the overnight charts with Jessica. "Core temperature normal, heart rate still concerning but consistent." She hesitated, fingers lingering over the echocardiogram results. "The defect is severe, but not immediately life-threatening, similar to Emma's, but with some differences in the septal positioning." Jessica squeezed her friend's shoulder. "You haven't slept properly. Let Dr. Ramirez take over for a few hours." "I can't," Sarah said simply, not elaborating on the pull she felt toward this abandoned child, a connection that transcended medical responsibility. "Dr. Mitchell?" A young nurse appeared at the doorway. "There's someone from social services here about the baby." Sarah nodded, expecting this. Protocol mandated state involvement with abandoned children. "I'll be right there." In the small conference room adjacent to the NICU, a woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and kind eyes, stood as Sarah entered. Shadow, still limping, but refusing to leave Sarah's side, drew the woman's surprised attention. "Amy Walker, Child Protective Services," she introduced herself, offering a firm handshake. "And this must be the hero we've been hearing about." "Shadow," Sarah confirmed. "He's staying with me until we sort things out." Amy's expression remained neutral, but her eyes assessed Sarah with professional concern. Everyone in social services knew about Dr. Mitchell's loss and subsequent divorce. "I understand you've taken a personal interest in this case." "The baby has a congenital heart defect that requires specialized care," Sarah replied, defaulting to medical justification rather than admitting the emotional tether she felt. "I'm the most qualified physician on staff to monitor her condition." "Have you named her?" Amy asked gently. The question caught Sarah off guard. "No, that's not my place. She's not—" Her voice faltered. "It's just for the paperwork." Amy clarified. "We need to call her something other than Baby Jane Doe." Sarah glanced down at Shadow, who had settled against her leg with a heavy sigh. "Hope," she said suddenly. "For now, let's call her Hope." Amy made a note in her file. "Hope it is. Now, what can you tell me about her condition and estimated age?" For the next hour, Sarah detailed the medical facts while Amy took notes and asked occasional questions. They were discussing placement options when Sheriff Anderson knocked on the conference room door. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, looking more rumpled than usual after clearly working through the night. "But I've got some information about our four-legged friend here." Shadow's ears perked up at Anderson's entrance, his posture straightening despite his evident exhaustion. "I ran his service number," Anderson continued. Shadow was assigned to Army Specialist James Miller, Explosive Ordnance Disposal Unit, deployed twice to Afghanistan, where Shadow was credited with saving his unit from multiple IEDs. Sarah leaned forward. Where is Specialist Miller now? Could he be connected to the baby? Anderson's expression sobered. That's the thing. Miller was reported missing 6 months ago after moving back to Oak Ridge. His family filed a missing persons report when he stopped answering calls. His truck was found at the trailhead up at Eagle Ridge, but no other signs. Search and rescue assumed he'd gone hiking and had an accident, but no body was ever recovered. The timing aligned perfectly with Shadow's appearance as a stray around town. Sarah absently stroked the dog's head, feeling a new connection to his obvious grief. "He was looking for his owner," she murmured. "Possibly," Anderson agreed. "But now I'm wondering if there's more to Miller's disappearance, especially with this baby showing up." "You think there's a connection?" Amy asked. Professional instincts engaged. "Town this small. Coincidences are rare," Anderson replied. "I'm reopening the Miller case," as if understanding his owner's name being discussed. Shadow whined softly, pressing closer to Sarah's leg. "There's something else," Anderson added. "We've checked with all local hospitals and midwives. No record of a birth matching Hope's description or time frame. Whoever the mother is, she didn't deliver in a medical facility." A soft knock interrupted them. Emily Parker stood in the doorway, her camera operator notably absent, but her reporter's notebook prominently displayed. "Sheriff, Dr. Mitchell, any comment on the rumors circulating about the baby and dog?" Anderson stepped forward, physically blocking Emily's view of Sarah and Amy. "Ms. Parker, this is a private meeting regarding a minor's welfare." "The community has questions," Emily persisted. "People are saying the dog might belong to James Miller, the veteran who went missing last summer. Is there a connection?" Sarah exchanged a startled look with Anderson. How had Emily pieced that together so quickly? "No comment at this time," Anderson stated firmly. "And I'd appreciate if you didn't publish speculation that could hamper an active investigation." After escorting the reluctant reporter out, Anderson turned to Sarah. "She knows something. Parker always has sources she shouldn't have." "I need to get back to Hope," Sarah said, standing. "They're running another series of tests this morning." Amy gathered her paperwork. "I'll begin the temporary custody process. For now, Hope remains in hospital care, but we'll need to identify a foster placement soon." She gave Sarah a meaningful look. "Unless there's someone here who might be interested in emergency foster certification." The suggestion hung in the air, tempting and terrifying. Sarah focused on Shadow instead of answering. "He needs medical attention too. Those wounds are infected, and he's severely malnourished." "The veterinary clinic attached to the teaching hospital can handle that," Amy suggested. "I have contacts there." "No," Sarah said quickly, surprising herself with her vehemence. "He stays with me. I'll have Dr. Reyes from Pet Emergency come examine him here." As the morning progressed, Hope underwent her tests, while Shadow reluctantly allowed the visiting veterinarian to clean his wounds and administer antibiotics. The dog's loyalty to Sarah had become the talk of the hospital staff, many sneaking treats and gentle pats when passing by. Shortly before noon, Thomas Wilson summoned Sarah to his office, his expression grave as she entered with Shadow still at her heels. "This has gone far enough, Dr. Mitchell," he began without preamble. "The board has concerns about your involvement with this case." Sarah stiffened. "The board hasn't even convened." "An emergency phone conference," Wilson clarified. "Your judgment is being questioned, particularly given your history." "My history makes me uniquely qualified to treat an infant with this specific cardiac condition," Sarah countered, keeping her voice steady despite the anger building inside. Wilson folded his hands on his pristinely organized desk. "It's not just the medical aspect. You've become emotionally attached to both the child and this animal. It's clouding your professional judgment." "Is it?" Sarah challenged. "Hope's condition has stabilized remarkably. My treatment protocol is working." "And what about bringing a stray animal into a sterile hospital environment? Not to mention taking responsibility for it without any authorization." Shadow, as if sensing he was the subject of discussion, sat up straighter beside Sarah's chair. "He saved Hope's life," Sarah said simply. "And he's clearly a trained service animal, not some random stray." Wilson sighed. "The hospital has liability concerns. Animal control will be here at 3 o'clock to take the dog to the county shelter." Sarah felt her chest tighten. "You can't do that." "It's already decided. I suggest you focus on your patient and let the proper authorities handle the animal." As Sarah left Wilson's office, her mind raced through options. She wouldn't let Shadow be taken away. Not after everything he'd done. And certainly not when she suspected he was still trying to communicate something important. Back in the NICU, she found Jessica reviewing Hope's latest test results with a worried expression. "What is it?" Sarah asked, immediately concerned. "Her cardiac enzymes are elevated," Jessica replied. "And there's something else." She handed Sarah the chart. "The blood type doesn't match what we initially recorded." Sarah frowned, reviewing the numbers. "Run it again, and add a full tox screen." "You think she was drugged?" Jessica asked, alarmed. "I don't know what to think anymore," Sarah admitted. "But something doesn't add up." As Jessica left to order the additional tests, Sarah's attention was drawn to the hospital's main entrance through the second-floor window. A man she didn't recognize was speaking animatedly with the receptionist, gesturing toward the elevators. Average height, muscular build, with close-cropped hair and an intensity visible even from a distance. Shadow growled low in his throat, the hair along his spine rising. "What is it, boy?" Sarah murmured, watching as the man was directed to the information desk. Something about his bearing, the military posture. The purposeful movements triggered an instinctive unease. Her phone buzzed with a text from Anderson. "Got security footage from gas station near where Shadow was first spotted. Reviewing now. Will update." Sarah hesitated, then made a decision. "Jessica," she called to her friend, who had returned with the lab orders, "I need you to keep Wilson away from Hope's room for a while. Can you think of something that would require his attention elsewhere?" Jessica raised an eyebrow but didn't question her. "The fire alarm inspection in the East Wing has been malfunctioning. That always gets him worked up about regulatory compliance." "Perfect. And if anyone asks, I'm taking a quick break to get Shadow some food." Instead of heading to the cafeteria, Sarah made her way to the hospital security office, Shadow limping determinedly beside her. The security supervisor, Dave Miller, no relation to the missing soldier, looked up in surprise when she entered. "Dr. Mitchell, what can I do for you?" "I need to see visitor logs and security footage from the main entrance for the past hour." Sarah said, dispensing with pretense. Dave hesitated. That's not really protocol without— Dave, Sarah interrupted. The baby Shadow saved might be in danger. I need to know who's been asking about her. Perhaps it was Shadow's alert posture or the urgency in Sarah's voice, but Dave relented, turning to his monitors. There's been a lot of interest, what with the news coverage. But yeah, one guy was pretty insistent about visiting the pediatric floor, said he was a relative of a patient. The security footage showed the same man Sarah had observed from the window. Up close, his face was clearly visible, handsome but hard, with a scar running along his jawline. Shadow growled again at the image. You know him, don't you? Sarah asked quietly, scratching behind the dog's ears. Dave checked his visitor log. Signed in as Daniel Wilson. No relation to our administrator. I assume. The surname sent a chill through Sarah. Wilson wasn't an uncommon name, but the coincidence felt significant. Can you flag him in the system alert security if he tries to access the NICU? Dave nodded slowly. I can, but I'll need more than a dog's reaction to justify it. Sarah's phone buzzed again with another text from Anderson. Coming to hospital now. Found connection between Miller and baby. Keep her secure. Sarah showed Dave the message. That's your justification. Call a security alert for the NICU. No visitors without direct authorization from me or Sheriff Anderson. As Dave picked up his radio to issue the order, Sarah knelt beside Shadow. What are you trying to tell me? Boy, who is Daniel Wilson? And why does he frighten you? Shadow's intelligent eyes met hers, filled with a knowing she couldn't dismiss as mere animal instinct. This dog had been trying to complete a mission since the moment he found Hope, and Sarah was beginning to suspect that mission extended far beyond simply delivering an abandoned baby to safety. The hospital corridors seemed to close in around Sarah as she hurried back toward the NICU, Shadow keeping pace despite his obvious pain. The storm outside had intensified again, a second wave of the blizzard that had thrust them all together. Through the windows, she could see only white, the world beyond the hospital walls, effectively erased. We're on lockdown, Jessica confirmed when Sarah reached Hope's room. Sheriff Anderson called it in. No one in or out of the pediatric wing without direct authorization. Sarah nodded, her attention immediately drawn to the tiny form in the incubator. Hope's color had improved dramatically overnight, the bluish tinge replaced by healthy pink. Her vitals displayed on the monitor showed continued stability, a testament to her fighting spirit. Has anyone unusual been asking about her? Sarah asked, checking the latest readings. Jessica hesitated. Actually, yes. A nurse I don't recognize tried to come in for routine vitals about 20 minutes ago. When I asked which service she was from, she disappeared. Shadow's ears pricked forward, his body tensing. What did she look like? Sarah asked, a new worry blooming. Blonde, thin, maybe early 30s. She had the right badge, but something felt off. Sarah turned to the security guard posted outside Hope's door. Find Dave in security. Tell him to review the footage of everyone who's been on this floor in the last hour. As the guard left to make the call, Sarah's pager buzzed urgently. The ER needed her multiple injuries from a pile-up on the icy highway leading into town. For a moment, she stood frozen, torn between her duty to incoming trauma patients and her deepening certainty that Hope remained in danger. Go, Jessica urged, reading her hesitation. I won't leave this room, and we have security right outside. These patients need you now." Sarah crouched beside Shadow. "Stay," she commanded firmly, pointing to a spot beside Hope's incubator. "Guard." The German shepherd's posture shifted subtly, his military training evident as he took up sentry position, eyes fixed on the doorway. "He understands," Jessica remarked with surprise. "More than we realize," Sarah agreed, hurrying toward the emergency department. The ER was controlled chaos, 3 critical patients from the highway accident and several more with less severe injuries waiting triage. Sarah's training took over, her hands steady as she assessed a young man with significant chest trauma. For 2 hours, she worked alongside the trauma team, her personal concerns temporarily submerged beneath immediate medical priorities. Sheriff Anderson found her there, his uniform dusted with snow, face grim as he waited for her to complete suturing a laceration. "You need to see this," he said without preamble when she finished, leading her to a quiet corner of the department. He unfolded a photograph, slightly water-damaged but clear enough. It showed a smiling man in army fatigues, handsome, with kind eyes, his arm around a pregnant woman with delicate features and long dark hair. Between them sat Shadow, younger and unscarred, alert and proud in his military vest. "James Miller," Anderson confirmed, tapping the soldier's image, "and his girlfriend, Lisa Chambers. This was taken about 7 months ago, according to his sister. Lisa was pregnant and due in December." Sarah stared at the woman's face, making the connection. The baby, almost certainly theirs. Anderson nodded. "But here's where it gets complicated. Lisa was previously married to Daniel Wilson," Sarah finished, the pieces clicking into place. Anderson's eyebrows rose. "How did you know?" "He was here, asking about pediatric patients." Shadow recognized him, or at least his scent, from security footage. She studied the photo again. "What happened to them?" Miller's sister said Lisa was running from an abusive relationship. She and James met at a veterans support group. He was dealing with PTSD. She was volunteering. They fell in love, but Lisa was terrified her ex-husband would find them. "So they disappeared together," Sarah surmised. "Tried to," Anderson corrected. "They were living off the grid in a cabin near Eagle Ridge. But about 6 months ago, James stopped checking in with his sister. That's when she reported him missing. And Lisa, no trace. Until possibly now." He reclaimed the photo, tucking it carefully into his jacket. "I've got deputies checking the area around the factory district where your staff said Shadow might have come from. If the baby was abandoned there..." Sarah's pager shrieked again, this time with the hospital's emergency code. "Code Silver. Pediatric floor." Her blood ran cold. "Code Silver, armed intruder." "Jessica," she breathed, already running toward the stairs, Anderson close behind. The elevators had automatically locked down with the security protocol. "Dr. Mitchell, wait," Anderson called, drawing his weapon. "Let security handle this." But Sarah was already taking the stairs 2 at a time, her only thought for Hope and Jessica and Shadow, who she'd commanded to guard them. The pediatric floor was eerily quiet when they emerged from the stairwell, the usual beeping of monitors and murmur of voices replaced by a tense silence. 2 security guards lay unconscious near the nurse's station, no blood visible but both clearly incapacitated. Anderson moved in front of Sarah, weapon raised. "Stay behind me," he whispered. They advanced slowly toward Hope's room, the sound of a low, threatening growl growing louder with each step. When they reached the doorway, the scene inside froze them both. Daniel Wilson, the man from the security footage, stood with his back to the window, a scalpel held against Jessica's throat. His other arm was in a makeshift sling, blood seeping through the fabric of his jacket. In front of the incubator, Shadow stood in attack position, teeth bared, a torn piece of Wilson's pant leg on the floor beside him. "Call off your dog, doctor," Wilson demanded, his voice surprisingly calm despite the wild look in his eyes. "Or the nurse bleeds out right here." "Shadow, stand down," Sarah ordered firmly, though every instinct screamed to let the dog finish what he'd started. Shadow's growl continued, but he took one step back, still positioning himself between Wilson and the incubator. "Smart animal," Wilson remarked. "Military trained, right, just like his owner was, before I put a bullet in him." The casual admission of murder sent ice through Sarah's veins. Anderson's grip tightened on his weapon. "Daniel Wilson," the sheriff said, "put down the scalpel and step away from the nurse." Wilson's laugh held no humor. "Not happening, Sheriff. That's my daughter in that incubator, and I'm taking her with me." "She's not your daughter," Sarah said, finding her voice. "She's James and Lisa's child." A flash of rage contorted Wilson's features. "Lisa is my wife. Whatever bastard child she's carrying belongs to me by law." "Where is Lisa now?" Sarah asked, desperately trying to keep him talking while watching for any opportunity to get Jessica free. Something shifted in Wilson's expression, a moment of uncertainty. "That's none of your concern." "Is she still alive?" Sarah pressed. "Is that why you want the baby, to use her as leverage to find Lisa?" Wilson's grip on the scalpel tightened, causing Jessica to whimper as it pressed against her skin. "Enough talking. I'm walking out of here with my daughter. Anyone tries to stop me, the nurse dies." Shadow's growl deepened, his muscles tensing as he prepared to lunge. "Wait!" Sarah said urgently, both to Wilson and Shadow. "The baby can't leave the hospital. She has a serious heart condition. She'll die without medical care." "You're lying," Wilson snarled, "trying to trick me." "It's true," Jessica managed, her voice strained with fear. "Congenital defect. She needs surgery when she's stronger." Wilson's certainty faltered visibly. "Then you're coming with us, doctor. You'll keep her alive until I decide what to do." "That's not going to happen," Anderson stated flatly, his weapon unwavering. The standoff stretched for several heartbeats, tension crackling in the air. Then a new sound broke the silence, a faint moan from the far side of the room, near the private bathroom door. All eyes turned toward the sound. The bathroom door stood slightly ajar, a pale hand visible on the floor inside. Wilson's face drained of color. "Lisa." In that moment of distraction, three things happened simultaneously. Jessica drove her elbow hard into Wilson's abdomen. Shadow launched himself at the arm holding the scalpel, and Anderson fired a single shot that shattered the window behind them. Wilson screamed as Shadow's teeth sank into his wrist, the scalpel clattering to the floor. Jessica stumbled away, and Anderson surged forward, tackling Wilson to the ground as Sarah rushed to the bathroom. Lisa Chambers lay curled on the floor, pale and trembling, a hospital gown draped over her thin frame. Her dark hair was matted with blood from a wound at her temple, but her eyes were alert, fixed on Sarah with desperate intensity. "My baby," she whispered. "Please, he can't take her." "He won't." Sarah promised, quickly checking Lisa's vitals. "Hope is safe?" Behind them, Anderson was handcuffing a subdued Wilson, who continued to shout threats and demands even as hospital security arrived to assist. Shadow limped to Lisa's side, whining softly as he nuzzled her hand. Her eyes widened in recognition, tears spilling over. "Shadow, you're alive." Her fingers weakly stroked his scarred muzzle. "You found her. You actually found her." "He never stopped looking," Sarah said gently, helping Lisa to sit up. "For either of you." As the chaos subsided and medical staff streamed in to attend to the injured, Sarah found herself standing between Hope's incubator and Lisa's newly wheeled-in bed, Shadow keeping vigil between them. The storm outside continued to rage. But here, in this small room, a fragile new beginning was taking shape from the wreckage of tragedy. Lisa reached weakly for Sarah's hand. "James asked Shadow to protect us. With his last breath, he said, 'Find help, boy. Bring them home.'" "I thought it was impossible." Her gaze drifted to her daughter, then back to the loyal dog who had accomplished the seemingly impossible mission. "Thank you for understanding what he was trying to tell you." Sarah squeezed the woman's cold fingers, remembering Shadow's determined eyes when he'd first entered the hospital. "I think," she said softly, "he was waiting for someone who needed to listen." Sarah's return to the hospital came earlier than planned, sleep proving elusive despite her exhaustion. The pre-dawn darkness felt fitting as she navigated the still treacherous roads, her mind clearer if not entirely at peace with the decisions ahead. Oak Ridge Memorial stood as a beacon against the night, its windows illuminated like a lighthouse guiding her home. For so long, this building had been her sanctuary, the place where her work made sense even when nothing else did. Now it felt like contested territory, her professional domain under threat. The night security guard nodded in recognition as she entered, not bothering to check her ID badge. "They've been asking for you, Dr. Mitchell," he said, his voice low with respectful urgency. "Third floor's been busy." Sarah's heart stuttered. "Hope, Lisa." "The baby's stable," he reassured her quickly. "But the mother woke up disoriented about an hour ago, pretty upset until they mentioned you'd be back soon." Relief mingled with renewed purpose as Sarah took the stairs rather than waiting for the elevator. On the third floor, she found Amy Walker dozing in a chair outside Lisa's room, a case file open on her lap. The social worker startled awake at Sarah's approach. "You're early," Amy noted, checking her watch. "Did you get any rest?" "Enough," Sarah lied smoothly. "How are they?" Amy gathered her papers, gesturing toward Lisa's room. "She's been in and out of consciousness, asking for her baby and for Shadow. I didn't have the heart to tell her about Administrator Wilson's decision. I need to see Shadow first," Sarah said. "Is Dr. Reyes still here?" "Left about an hour ago. Said the antibiotics are working, but slowly. He's in treatment room 2 in the veterinary wing." Sarah found Shadow exactly where she'd left him, IV fluid still dripping steadily into his leg. His condition appeared marginally improved. The feverish heat had subsided somewhat, but his usual alertness had dimmed. When he saw Sarah, his tail thumped weakly against the examination table. "Hey, boy," she murmured, stroking his head gently. "Still fighting, aren't you?" Shadow whined softly, attempting to raise his head despite obvious pain. "Easy," Sarah soothed. "Save your strength." For several minutes, she simply sat with him, reviewing Dr. Reyes's notes and monitoring his vital signs. The infection was responding to treatment. But the years of neglect and injury had taken their toll. Full recovery would require weeks of care, proper nutrition, and rehabilitation. With a final gentle pat, Sarah reluctantly left Shadow to check on her human patients. Hope's condition remained stable, her tiny form peaceful in the NICU incubator. The cardiac monitors showed the expected abnormalities, but no acute deterioration. Sarah updated the charts, adding detailed notes for the incoming pediatric cardiologist consultant. Lisa Chambers' room was dimly lit when Sarah entered, monitors casting a pale blue glow over the woman's gaunt features. Despite extensive surgery and multiple transfusions, Lisa's complexion remained alarmingly pale, her dark hair a stark contrast against the white hospital linens. "Dr. Mitchell." Lisa's voice was barely audible, her eyes fluttering open at Sarah's approach. "I'm here," Sarah confirmed, automatically checking the monitors and IV lines. "How's your pain level?" "Manageable," Lisa whispered, though the tightness around her eyes suggested otherwise. "My baby, Hope, is doing well," Sarah assured her, using the temporary name without thinking. "She's a fighter." A ghost of a smile touched Lisa's cracked lips. "Hope you named her, just temporarily, for the paperwork. I hope that's okay." "It's perfect," Lisa breathed. "James always said Hope was all we needed." Her expression clouded. "Shadow, is he? He's receiving treatment downstairs," Sarah said, choosing her words carefully. "The infection from his wounds is serious, but he's responding to antibiotics." Relief washed over Lisa's features. "He protected us. After—" her voice broke, tears filling her eyes. "After Daniel found our cabin, James told Shadow to get us away, to find help, but I was so weak after the birth, and Daniel was hunting us. I couldn't keep up with Shadow carrying Hope, so I told him to take her, to save her." A sob escaped her. "I didn't think it would work. I thought I'd sentenced my baby to die." Sarah gently took Lisa's hand, mindful of the IV lines. "Shadow never gave up. He brought hope straight to people who could help. And somehow, he led us back to you." Lisa's tears flowed freely now. "James said Shadow was the smartest dog he'd ever trained, that he understood more than most humans gave him credit for." "I believe it," Sarah said softly. "But Lisa, I need to understand what happened. Sheriff Anderson needs your statement. Daniel is in custody, but to keep you and Hope safe." "It was 6 months ago," Lisa began, her voice strengthening as she spoke. "Daniel found out where James and I were living. He came with a gun. James tried to reason with him, but Daniel was high, paranoid. He kept saying I belonged to him, that the baby was his property." She swallowed hard. "James got me out the back door, told Shadow to protect us. Then I heard the gunshot." Sarah's chest tightened at the horror in Lisa's eyes. "Shadow wanted to go back, but James had given him an order to stay with me. We hid in the woods for days. Daniel kept searching. Eventually, we found an abandoned building on the edge of town. I was already 7 months pregnant, struggling to find food for both of us." "Where were you when Shadow brought Hope to the hospital?" Sarah asked gently. "In that old factory by the railroad tracks. I'd gone into labor 2 days before. Shadow had been bringing me scraps. But I was so weak after Hope was born. When Daniel somehow tracked us there, I knew we couldn't outrun him again. I told Shadow to take the baby, to find help. Her fingers tightened around Sarah's. I never thought I'd see either of them again. How did you end up here? In the hospital. Lisa's expression darkened. Daniel found me after Shadow escaped with Hope. He was enraged, demanding to know where the baby was. When I wouldn't tell him, she gestured weakly to her injuries. Eventually, he got a call that a dog matching Shadow's description had been seen at the hospital. He forced me to come with him. Said he'd kill Hope if I didn't cooperate in claiming her. So you were with him when he first came to the hospital? Lisa nodded. In his car. He made me stay there while he went in to scout the situation. When he came back, he was furious about the security and police presence. He left me locked in the car while he went to find another way in. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I managed to break out. Made it into the hospital through an employee entrance. I was trying to find Hope when I heard Shadow barking. That's when Daniel found me again. Dragged me into that bathroom to hide. The pieces were falling into place now, the timeline making sense. As Lisa finished her account, a soft knock at the door announced Sheriff Anderson's arrival. Sorry to interrupt, he said, taking in Lisa's distressed expression, but we need to move quickly. The prosecutor wants a formal statement to file charges against Wilson. Over the next hour, Lisa recounted her story officially, her voice growing weaker with each detail. By the time Anderson finished, her eyelids were drooping despite her efforts to stay alert. Get some rest, Sarah urged, adjusting Lisa's pain medication. Hope is safe, and so are you. As Lisa drifted into medicated sleep, Sarah and Anderson stepped into the hallway. How solid is the case against Wilson? She asked quietly. Anderson's expression was grim. Murder charges will depend on whether we find James Miller's body, but attempted murder, kidnapping, assault, those are solid. He's not walking away from this. He hesitated. There's something else. The drug tests came back. Wilson's system was full of methamphetamine, and we found evidence he was operating a lab. That's likely what fueled his obsession with finding Lisa and the baby. He was manufacturing drugs. Sarah's mind raced to the implications. Was James involved? Quite the opposite. Anderson replied, according to what we've pieced together, James discovered Wilson's operation through his veteran support network. Several former soldiers had become addicted after being recruited as dealers. James was working with federal authorities as an informant when he met Lisa. The revelation added another layer to the tragedy. James Miller hadn't just been trying to protect the woman he loved, but working to save his fellow veterans from the poison Wilson was spreading through their community. As dawn broke over Oak Ridge, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold, Sarah found herself standing at the window in the hospital's small chapel, Anderson's revelations still echoing in her mind. The door opened softly behind her. Thomas Wilson entered, his expression uncharacteristically subdued. Dr. Mitchell, he acknowledged. I expected to find you with the dog. Sarah turned to face him, too emotionally drained for hostility. His name is Shadow, and he needs rest. Wilson nodded stiffly. I've spoken with the board. In light of recent developments, they've reconsidered their position, meaning animal control has been notified their services won't be required. The dog Shadow can remain under veterinary care within the hospital until other arrangements are made. Relief washed through Sarah, though she kept her expression neutral. What changed their minds? Wilson's gaze shifted to the window, avoiding direct eye contact. The story has gone national. Hero military dog saves baby. Reunites mother after months missing is trending across all platforms. The hospital is receiving considerable positive attention. Of course, public relations had accomplished what compassion couldn't. Sarah bit back a caustic response, recognizing the victory regardless of its motivation. "There's something else," Wilson continued, finally meeting her eyes. "The cardiac consultant reviewed Hope's case this morning. He concurs with your assessment and treatment plan, but believes the surgery should be performed at Mayo Clinic. They have specialists with more experience in this particular defect." Sarah had expected this, despite her expertise. Oak Ridge Memorial lacked the specialized pediatric cardiac surgery team a case this complex required. "When would they transfer her?" "That's why I came to find you," Wilson replied. Given the circumstances, Lisa's condition, the ongoing criminal case, and the security concerns, Mayo has agreed to send their surgical team here instead. Dr. Lawrence Blake will arrive this afternoon to coordinate with you. The concession was significant. Bringing in an external surgical team was expensive and logistically complex. Sarah studied Wilson's face, sensing there was more. "And," Wilson cleared his throat, "the board would like you to consider taking on a temporary guardianship role for the child during her mother's recovery." Miss Walker from Social Services suggested it would provide the most stable continuity of care. Sarah stared at him, momentarily speechless. "Yesterday, you were questioning my professional judgment because of my attachment to this case." "Yesterday, we didn't have the full picture," Wilson countered. "Lisa Chambers has specifically requested you as Hope's guardian if anything happens during her recovery. Given your medical expertise and the child's condition, it makes sense." Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed with an urgent message from Dr. Reyes. "Shadow critical? Come now." Without another word to Wilson, Sarah rushed toward the veterinary wing, her heart pounding. She found Dr. Reyes hooking Shadow up to additional monitoring equipment, the dog's breathing shallow and labored. "What happened?" Sarah demanded, moving to Shadow's side. "Septic shock." Reyes answered grimly. "The infection reached his bloodstream. His organs are starting to fail. Treatment options. We're maxing out the antibiotics, adding vasopressors to maintain blood pressure. But honestly, Sarah, it may not be enough. His system is too compromised from the long-term neglect and injuries." Sarah looked down at Shadow, remembering his determination as he carried Hope through the blizzard, his protective stance when Daniel Wilson threatened them. This dog had completed his mission against impossible odds, held on through pain and infection until he knew Lisa and Hope were safe. "Tell me what you need," she said firmly. "Whatever resources, whatever help, he doesn't die today." Dr. Reyes hesitated. "The treatments are expensive, with no guarantee. I'll cover it personally if insurance won't." Sarah interrupted. "This dog saved 2 lives at the cost of his own health. We don't give up on him now." As if hearing her words, Shadow's eyes flickered open, meeting Sarah's gaze with that same intelligent awareness that had struck her from their first encounter. His tail moved weakly, not quite a wag, but an acknowledgement. "You understand, don't you?" Sarah whispered, stroking his head gently. "They're safe now. Lisa, hope they're going to be okay. You did it. Shadow, you completed your mission." Sheriff Anderson appeared at the doorway, his face solemn. "Sarah, there's something you need to see." 1 week after the snowstorm that had brought them all together, Sarah stood at the window of her office, watching as the last of Oak Ridge's record-breaking snow began to melt under tentative spring sunshine. The hospital had gradually returned to its normal rhythms, though whispers of the miracle dog and the blizzard baby still circulated among staff and patients alike. Daniel Wilson's arrest had dominated local headlines for days. The discovery of James Miller's remains found buried near the cabin where he and Lisa had hidden had finally allowed authorities to charge Wilson with first-degree murder. The additional charges of drug manufacturing, attempted kidnapping, and aggravated assault ensured he would never threaten Lisa or Hope again. Sarah's desk was cluttered with cards and letters from across the country, strangers touched by Shadow's story, offering everything from donations for his medical care to adoption offers for Lisa and Hope. The hospital's public relations department had carefully managed the media frenzy, but couldn't prevent the case from capturing national attention. Sarah had declined all interview requests, focusing instead on the 3 patients who had become the center of her world. A soft knock drew her attention from the window. Dr. Lawrence Blake, the cardiac specialist from Mayo Clinic, stood in her doorway, tablet in hand. "Good news," he announced without preamble. "Hope's latest echocardiogram shows improved function. I think we can safely postpone surgery for another month. Give her time to gain more strength." Sarah nodded, relief washing through her. "Lisa will be glad to hear it. She's been worried the surgery would happen before she's discharged." "How is she recovering?" Blake asked, his professional interest genuine. "Slower than she'd like, but steady. The internal bleeding was extensive, and she's still battling anemia." Sarah managed a small smile. "But she's determined, spends every possible moment with Hope." Blake studied her face. "And you, Wilson, mentioned you're considering temporary guardianship." "It's complicated," Sarah admitted. "Lisa has no family, no support system. She needs extensive rehabilitation after discharge, and Hope requires specialized medical monitoring." "It's a significant commitment," Blake observed, "especially for someone with your schedule." Sarah had been wrestling with this reality for days. The logical part of her brain cataloged all the reasons it was impractical: her long hours, the emotional entanglement, the eventual heartbreak of letting go. Yet each time she held Hope, each time she witnessed Lisa's determination to recover for her daughter, the decision seemed to make itself. "I've reduced my clinical hours," she said finally, "and hired a night nurse for when I'm on call. My house has a ground-floor guest room that will work for Lisa during her recovery." Blake nodded, unsurprised. "The social worker mentioned you were already making arrangements, for what it's worth. I think it's the right call medically. Having a pediatric cardiologist as a guardian gives Hope the best chance at optimal outcomes." After Blake left, Sarah gathered her things to make her afternoon rounds. Her first stop, as always, was the veterinary wing where Shadow continued his slow recovery. The German Shepherd's condition had stabilized after those critical hours when Sarah feared they would lose him. The septic shock had been reversed through aggressive treatment, though the toll on his body remained evident in his weakened state. Dr. Zareyas had been cautiously optimistic in her recent assessments, emphasizing that Shadow's military breeding and training had likely given him the physical resilience to survive. "Hey, buddy," Sarah greeted softly as she entered his treatment room. Shadow's ears perked forward, his tail thumping weakly against the blanket. Though still connected to IV fluids and antibiotics, he had been moved from the treatment table to a large padded bed on the floor, a concession to both his improving condition and his evident discomfort at being restrained. Sarah settled beside him, running her hand gently over his scarred head. "You're looking better today." And he was. The fever had broken completely 3 days ago, and his eyes had regained their alert intelligence. The most recent blood work showed his organ function returning to normal ranges, though Dr. Reyes cautioned that his complete recovery would take weeks, possibly months. "Lisa's asking about you again," Sarah continued, knowing from experience that Shadow seemed to understand more than most humans gave him credit for. "She wanted to come down herself, but her physical therapist wouldn't approve the wheelchair trip just yet." Shadow whined softly at the mention of Lisa's name. "Soon," Sarah promised. "She'll be strong enough soon, and Hope is doing better too. The surgery is postponed, which is good news. Gives everyone more time to heal." As she spoke, Sarah checked Shadow's IV lines and examined the healing wounds on his leg and side. The infection had caused significant tissue damage, but clean granulation was finally visible at the wound edges, a promising sign. "Dr. Reyes says you might be able to try walking a little tomorrow," she continued. "Just around the room at first. We need to rebuild your strength." Shadow's gaze remained fixed on her face, his expression almost human in its comprehension. Sometimes, in quiet moments like this, Sarah found herself wondering how much he truly understood not just of her words, but of the entire situation that had brought them together. "The community's been amazing," she told him, settling more comfortably on the floor beside his bed. "There's a fundraiser tonight at the VFW Hall for Lisa and Hope, and for you too. Sheriff Anderson says half the town is planning to attend." The outpouring of support had surprised even Sarah, who had lived in Oak Ridge her entire life. Veterans groups had been particularly moved by James Miller's story and Shadow's loyalty, organizing everything from meal deliveries to the hospital to offers of construction work to make Sarah's home accessible for Lisa's recovery. "I never expected any of this," Sarah admitted quietly. "A week ago, I was just going through the motions: Shadow, work, home, sleep, repeat. Nothing mattered much after Emma died." She swallowed hard, the familiar ache of her daughter's loss still present, but somehow transformed. "I think maybe you saved more than just Hope and Lisa." Shadow nudged her hand with his nose, a gesture that felt almost like comfort. Sarah's phone chimed with a message from Jessica. "Lisa asking for you. Seems urgent but stable." "Duty calls," Sarah told Shadow, reluctantly rising. "I'll be back before my shift ends." She found Lisa sitting up in bed, her color markedly improved from even the day before. Hope lay in a bassinet beside her, tiny fists waving as she examined the world with increasingly alert eyes. "There you are," Lisa said, her voice stronger than it had been all week. "I was hoping to catch you before the shift change." Sarah checked Hope first, then Lisa's monitors, all showing continued improvement. "Everything looks good." "What's so urgent?" Lisa hesitated, then reached for a folded piece of paper on her bedside table. "Sheriff Anderson brought these by this morning. James's personal effects from the cabin. There was a letter for me. But there was also this." She handed Sarah a creased photograph, its edges worn as if frequently handled. It showed James Miller in his army uniform, kneeling beside a much younger Shadow. Both looked directly at the camera with matching expressions of dignity and purpose. "Turn it over," Lisa instructed softly. On the back, written in precise handwriting, were the words, "Shadow knows who to trust. If you're reading this, he chose well." Sarah's throat tightened. He wrote this before. Lisa nodded. James knew Daniel might find us eventually. He told me once that if anything happened to him, Shadow would complete the mission. Her fingers trembled as she took back the photograph. He meant protecting us, finding someone who could help, finding you. I just happened to be working that night. Sarah demurred. No, Lisa said with quiet certainty. Shadow had been watching the hospital for days before the storm. One of the nurses mentioned seeing him around the staff entrance repeatedly. He was assessing, evaluating just like he was trained to do. He chose you, Sarah, and James would have trusted his judgment implicitly. The thought was both unsettling and oddly comforting. Had Shadow somehow recognized something in Sarah, some quality that made her the right person to entrust with hope and Lisa's safety? Or had it simply been circumstance and desperation that drove his actions that snowy night? There's something else, Lisa continued, her expression turning serious. Amy Walker came by with the temporary guardianship papers for Hope. She mentioned you're preparing your home for both of us. Sarah nodded cautiously. The guest room is being modified with hospital equipment for your recovery. It's all arranged unless you'd prefer another option. It's not that, Lisa assured her quickly. Your generosity is overwhelming. It's just, she paused, gathering her thoughts. I need to know Shadow will be there too. The request caught Sarah off guard. Lisa, your focus should be on your recovery and hope right now. Shadow will need specialized care for weeks, possibly months. I know, Lisa acknowledged. But he's family, the last connection Hope and I have to James. He completed his mission despite everything, and he deserves to come home with us. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. James would want us all together? Sarah considered the logistics. Her house was modest but had a fenced yard. Shadow's ongoing medical needs would require regular veterinary visits, but Dr. Reyes had already offered to make house calls as part of her support for the case that had captivated the hospital staff. If Dr. Reyes clears him medically, then yes. Sarah decided. Shadow comes home with us. Lisa's relief was palpable. Thank you for everything, for understanding what matters. Later that evening, after completing her rounds and checking on Shadow one final time, Sarah found herself drawn to the hospital's small chapel. The space was empty, quiet in a way few areas of the hospital ever achieved. She sat in the back row, not praying exactly, but allowing herself a moment of reflection. The past week had reshaped her life in ways she was still struggling to comprehend. The carefully constructed walls she'd built after Emma's death and her subsequent divorce had been breached, leaving her vulnerable again to connection, to potential loss, to hope. Thought I might find you here, came Sheriff Anderson's voice from the doorway. Mind some company. Sarah gestured to the seat beside her. How did the fundraiser go? Still going strong, he replied, settling next to her with a respectful distance between them. We've raised enough to cover all of Shadow's medical expenses and then some. The mayor's talking about a permanent memorial for James Miller, something about his service to the community and sacrifice. He deserves to be remembered, Sarah agreed. Anderson nodded, his expression thoughtful. You know, in all the chaos, I never properly thanked you. Your instincts about Shadow, about the whole situation, they were spot on when the rest of us were missing the bigger picture. I just listened to what Shadow was trying to tell us. Sarah demurred. That's exactly it, Anderson insisted. You listened when no one else would, first to Shadow, then to Lisa. Most people would have called animal control immediately, followed protocol to the letter. But you saw something more. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the events of the past week settling between them like a shared understanding. Wilson mentioned you're taking them in, all three of them. Anderson finally said, "That's a big commitment." "Temporary," Sarah clarified, though the word felt hollow even as she spoke it. "Just until Lisa's back on her feet and Hope's had her surgery." Anderson's knowing look suggested he wasn't convinced by her casual tone. "Need any help getting the house ready? I'm pretty handy with basic carpentry." The offer was genuine, his expression open in a way Sarah hadn't allowed herself to notice before. Something shifted subtly between them. Not romance exactly, not yet, but possibility. "Actually," she admitted, "I could use help with a ramp for the back entrance. And Shadow will need a sheltered area in the yard while he recovers." "Consider it done." "Anderson Robert," she reminded herself, said with a smile, "just tell me when." 6 months later, on a bright autumn morning, Sarah stood in her backyard watching as Shadow navigated the grass with increasing confidence. His gait would always carry a slight limp. Dr. Reyes had warned, but his recovery had exceeded everyone's expectations. Inside, Lisa was preparing lunch while Hope napped in the modified nursery that had once been Emma's room. The heart surgery at 3 months had been successful, the prognosis now excellent for a normal, healthy life. Lisa's physical recovery had been similarly positive, though the emotional healing from James's loss and her ordeal would take much longer. As for Sarah herself, the woman who had sleepwalked through life after losing her daughter, now found herself at the center of an unconventional family, bound together by tragedy, but sustained by something more powerful. Shadow looked up from his explorations, meeting Sarah's gaze with that same knowing intelligence that had drawn her to him from the beginning. His mission, it seemed, had evolved far beyond what even James Miller might have envisioned. "We're okay now," Sarah told him softly. "All of us." And Shadow's tail wagged in what she could only interpret as agreement before he turned to carefully make his way back to the house, back to Hope and Lisa, back to the family he had fought so desperately to save and, in doing so, had helped Sarah find her way home as well. As we age, we often wonder if our greatest contributions are behind us, if our capacity to make a difference has diminished with our youth. Shadow's story reminds us this simply isn't true. This loyal German shepherd, wounded and alone after losing his beloved owner, never stopped believing in his purpose, protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Like many of us who've weathered life's storms, Shadow's greatest moment of heroism came not despite his scars and limitations, but because of the wisdom they brought him. He recognized in Dr. Sarah Mitchell what we all hope someone sees in us, not our wounds, but our unwavering strength beneath them. The family they formed, a grieving doctor, a traumatized mother, an innocent child, and a battle-scarred service dog, reflects the families many of us create in our golden years, bound not by blood, but by the deeper connections of shared experience and mutual rescue. Shadow's story isn't just about a dog saving a baby. It's about how we're never too broken, too scarred, or too old to complete our most important missions. Sometimes, like Shadow, the greatest chapters of our lives begin precisely when we think our story might be ending. The pediatric trauma room erupted into controlled chaos as Sarah burst through the doors with the near-frozen infant in her arms. "Get me a core temperature, warming blankets, and start a pediatric IV now." Her voice carried the sharp edge of command that brooked no argument. Jessica was already there, pulling the warming equipment closer as Sarah gently placed the tiny body on the examination table. Estimated age newborn, female, severe hypothermia, possible exposure of several hours. Sarah's clinical assessment flowed automatically while her heart hammered against her ribs. "Temperature 92.1, called out the resident who had joined them. "Bradycardic at 70 BPM. Start warm saline. Slow infusion," Sarah ordered, her fingers carefully examining the infant's limbs for frostbite. The baby's cry was weak, pitiful, but it was there. A fighter. Outside the trauma room, Shadow paced anxiously, his nails clicking against the linoleum floor. When a security guard approached with a catch pole, the dog growled a low, serious warning that stopped the man in his tracks. By 1:15 a.m., the hospital had activated its abandoned child protocol. Sheriff Anderson arrived despite the blizzard, his normally ruddy face solemn as he shook snow from his heavy coat. "Found in the middle of this storm?" he asked, shaking his head. "Who would leave a newborn out there tonight of all nights?" Sarah, momentarily stepping out of the trauma room where the baby was now stabilized but critical, brushed hair from her forehead with the back of her wrist. If not for the dog, she wouldn't have survived another hour. It's a miracle she's alive now. Anderson's gaze shifted to Shadow, who sat rigidly at attention near the trauma room doors. "That's no ordinary stray. Look at his posture." Sarah approached Shadow slowly, noticing for the first time the disciplined way he held himself despite obvious pain and exhaustion. When she crouched before him, Shadow didn't flinch or cower like a dog accustomed to abuse. "He's trained," she murmured, reaching cautiously to check for a collar among the matted fur. Her fingers encountered something metallic embedded in the thick coat around his neck. Gently working through the tangles, she pulled out a worn military dog tag. "Shadow," she read aloud. "Service number K9-7724 Explosive Detection Unit." She looked up at Anderson. "He's a military dog, which means he's government property," came a new voice. Thomas Wilson stood in the hallway, his tailored overcoat impossibly unwrinkled despite the storm. "And that dog is a liability in a sterile hospital environment." Sarah straightened, instinctively positioning herself between Shadow and the administrator. "This liability just saved a baby's life." "Protocol dictates—" "I don't give a damn about protocol right now," Sarah interrupted, surprising even herself with the vehemence in her voice. "This dog stays until we know more." Wilson's thin lips pressed together. "We'll discuss this in my office. Immediately." As if understanding the threat, Shadow pressed closer to Sarah's leg. For the first time in months, Sarah felt something stir within her, a protective instinct she thought had died with Emma. Anderson cleared his throat. "Maybe we should focus on the baby first. Any identification birthmarks, distinguishing features?" "Nothing obvious," Sarah replied, grateful for the redirection. "But—" She hesitated, remembering the strange sensation she'd felt when examining the infant. "There is something unusual. A birthmark on her chest." "What kind of birthmark?" Jessica asked, emerging from the trauma room. "Heart-shaped," Sarah said quietly. "Exactly like Emma's." An uncomfortable silence fell. Everyone on staff knew about Sarah's daughter and her fatal heart condition. "Sarah?" Jessica began gently. "I know what you're thinking." Sarah cut her off. but I'm not projecting or whatever psychological term you want to use. This baby has the exact same birthmark in the exact same location. I'm ordering an echocardiogram. Wilson cleared his throat. Dr. Mitchell, perhaps given your personal history, you should recuse yourself from this case. Before Sarah could respond, the hospital's front entrance doors slid open. Despite the late hour and brutal weather, local news reporter Emily Parker strode in, camera operator in tow, snowflakes melting on her perfectly styled hair. Dr. Mitchell, is it true a stray dog brought an abandoned baby to the hospital tonight? Emily's voice carried through the lobby, her practiced smile never reaching her calculating eyes. How did you hear about this already? Anderson demanded, stepping forward to block her path. Police scanner, Emily replied smoothly. Plus about 50 social media posts. Nothing stays secret in Oak Ridge. She angled to get a better view of Shadow. Is that the hero dog? Our viewers would love this story. This isn't a story. It's a patient, Sarah said firmly. And I'm not commenting while a child's welfare is at stake. Emily's smile tightened. The public has a right to know. The public has a right to wait until we have actual information. Anderson interrupted. Now please leave before I have you removed for interfering with an active investigation. As the reporter reluctantly retreated, promising to return, Wilson seized the opportunity. This is exactly why the dog needs to go. We'll have media circus, potential lawsuits if it bites someone. I'll take responsibility for him, Sarah said suddenly. Wilson blinked. Excuse me. Shadow stays with me. I'll sign whatever waiver you need. Sarah felt the dog lean against her leg, warm and solid. He found this baby for a reason. I'm not separating them until we understand why. You can't just... Actually, Anderson interjected, as this is now a criminal investigation into child abandonment, I can designate the dog as evidence. He needs to be available in case he can lead us back to where the baby was found. And Wilson's face reddened. But before he could respond, Jessica called urgently from the trauma room doorway. Dr. Mitchell, you need to see this. Sarah rushed back in, Shadow limping determinedly at her heels despite the staff's concerned looks. On the monitor above the warming bed, the echocardiogram revealed what Sarah had both feared and somehow expected: the distinctive abnormal structure of a congenital heart defect, nearly identical to what had taken Emma's life. How is this possible? Jessica whispered. Sarah stared at the screen, the statistical impossibility warring with the evidence before her eyes. I don't know, she admitted softly. But I'm not leaving this baby's side until I find out. Behind them, Shadow settled on the floor with a heavy sigh. His intelligent eyes fixed on the tiny form in the incubator. Whatever brought them all together this night, his posture seemed to say, was far from coincidence. And Sarah Mitchell, for the first time since losing her daughter, felt a flicker of purpose reignite within her frozen heart. The aftermath of Wilson's attack brought a deceptive calm to Oak Ridge Memorial. With the perpetrator in custody and mother and child reunited, the immediate danger had passed. Yet for Sarah, the hours that followed felt like walking through quicksand, every step forward fraught with unseen complications. Lisa Chambers' condition deteriorated rapidly after the confrontation. The head wound was merely the most visible of her injuries. Internal bleeding from what appeared to be repeated physical trauma required emergency surgery. As she was wheeled toward the operating room, her fingers clutched weakly at Sarah's sleeve. "Promise me," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rush of medical preparations. "If something happens, Take care of her. Don't let the system swallow her." Before Sarah could respond, the surgical team whisked Lisa away, leaving her standing in the corridor with the weight of an impossible promise. Shadow pressed against her leg as if sensing her turmoil. "Dr. Mitchell." Thomas Wilson's voice cut through her thoughts. He stood several feet away, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled from the hospital lockdown. "A word, please." In his office, Wilson didn't bother with preamble. "The board has convened an emergency meeting. Your actions today, while commendable in outcome, represented significant violations of hospital protocol." Sarah stared at him, momentarily speechless. A violent criminal was apprehended, and 2 lives were saved. "At considerable risk to staff and patients," Wilson countered. "Your personal involvement with this case has crossed professional boundaries. The dog remains a liability issue despite its heroics." "His name is Shadow," Sarah said quietly. "And he's the reason Lisa and Hope are alive." Wilson sighed, removing his glasses to pinch the bridge of his nose. "Animal control is waiting. With the immediate threat resolved, there's no justification for keeping a stray animal in a medical facility." The air seemed to evaporate from Sarah's lungs. "He's not a stray. He belongs with Lisa and Hope. Lisa Chambers may not survive her injuries," Wilson stated bluntly. "And even if she does, she's in no position to care for an animal. The child will likely be placed in foster care pending a full investigation. That's assuming her heart condition even allows for—" "Don't," Sarah interrupted, a dangerous edge in her voice. "Don't you dare suggest Hope won't survive. I've treated more pediatric cardiac cases than anyone in this hospital. Which is precisely why you should be focusing on her medical care, not acting as some sort of guardian for both mother and child, and certainly not for a dog with unknown vaccination history." From the floor beside Sarah's chair, Shadow lifted his head, his eyes moving between the 2 humans as if following their conversation. The infection in his wounds had worsened. Sarah had noticed the heat radiating from his body, the slight tremor in his limbs when he stood. "He needs medical attention," Sarah said, changing tactics. "The vet treated his surface wounds, but there's clearly systemic infection setting in. All the more reason for animal control to take custody." Wilson pushed a form across his desk. "Sign this, acknowledging the transfer of the animal." Sarah left the form untouched. "And if I refuse," Wilson's expression hardened, "then the board will have no choice but to consider your fitness to continue treating any patients at this hospital, much less this particular case." The threat hung in the air between them, explicit and immovable. Sarah had spent her entire career at Oak Ridge Memorial, built her reputation and practice within these walls. To walk away would mean abandoning not just her position, but the patients who depended on her, including Hope. "Give me 24 hours, she finally said. "Lisa deserves to know what's happening when she wakes up from surgery." "If she wakes up," Wilson corrected coldly. 12 hours. And the dog stays confined to the veterinary wing until then." It was the closest thing to a compromise she would get. Sarah nodded curtly, helping Shadow to his feet as they left the administrator's office. In the veterinary wing, attached to the main hospital but separated by double doors, Dr. Reyes examined Shadow more thoroughly while Sarah watched, arms crossed tightly across her chest. "The infection is significant," the veterinarian confirmed. "He needs IV antibiotics and fluids. There's also evidence of older injuries that never properly healed broken ribs. Damaged joint in the right rear leg. This dog has been through hell." "Will he recover?" Sarah asked, voice tight. Dr. Reyes nodded. With proper treatment, yes, he's strong, despite everything. Military dogs are bred for resilience. Sarah thanked her colleague and sat beside Shadow's treatment table, stroking his head gently as the IV fluids began to flow. Just rest now, she murmured. You did your job. You found help for them. Shadow's eyes, clouded with pain and medication, remained fixed on hers. His loyalty pierced straight through the professional distance she'd maintained since Emma's death, the careful walls she'd built to keep grief at bay, while still performing her duties. Her phone vibrated with a text from Jessica. Lisa out of surgery. Critical but stable. Baby also stable. Sheriff needs statement when you're ready. Shadow whined softly, as if understanding the message's content. She's alive, Sarah told him. They both are. For now, she didn't add. Hope's heart condition would require intervention, likely surgery within months. Lisa's recovery would be lengthy, complicated by psychological trauma and potential legal issues. And Shadow. Sarah swallowed hard, facing the reality that Wilson's threat wasn't empty. Her career, her ability to care for Hope medically, hung in the balance. Yet, the thought of surrendering Shadow to animal control felt like betraying a sacred trust. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Amy Walker stood in the doorway, her expression somber. I heard what happened, the social worker said. How are you holding up? Sarah gave a hollow laugh. Shouldn't you be asking about Lisa and Hope? I've already spoken with their doctors, Amy replied, taking a seat opposite Sarah. Now I'm asking about you. The simple kindness nearly broke Sarah's composure. Wilson's given me 12 hours before Shadow goes to animal control. Lisa just survived major surgery and doesn't even know yet. Hope needs cardiac monitoring and eventually surgery. And her voice caught. I promised to protect them both, but I don't see how. Amy studied her thoughtfully. When was the last time you slept properly? Sarah. The question was unexpected. I don't know. Before the storm, I suppose. That's what I thought? Amy stood, her decision made. Go home, shower, eat something substantial, sleep for at least 4 hours. I'll stay with Hope, and Dr. Reyes will monitor Shadow. Nothing will happen until you return. Wilson. Let me worry about Administrator Wilson, Amy interrupted firmly. I've dealt with bureaucrats far more intimidating than him. Go. You can't help anyone if you collapse. Sarah hesitated, looking at Shadow. His eyes were heavy with sedation, but he managed a soft whine that sounded almost like permission. 4 hours, she agreed reluctantly. And you'll call if anything changes with either of them? Amy nodded. The second anything happens. Now go. The drive home through snow-covered streets felt surreal after the intensity of the hospital. Sarah's small house stood dark and silent, untouched since she'd left for her shift before the storm. Was it only yesterday? It felt like weeks had passed. Inside, she mechanically followed Amy's instructions: shower, food, bed. But as she lay in the darkness, sleep refused to come. Her mind replayed Lisa's whispered plea, Shadow's determined eyes as he carried Hope through the blizzard, Wilson's ultimatum, on her nightstand. Emma's photograph caught the faint light from the window, her daughter smiling, unaware of the heart defect that would claim her life just weeks after the picture was taken. Beside it lay Sarah's divorce papers, signed and finalized 6 months ago. "What am I supposed to do?" she whispered to the empty room. "How do I save all of them?" The answer, when it finally came, carried her into troubled sleep. She couldn't. Something would have to be sacrificed. The only question was what or who she could bear to lose.